traditional buyers, I feel like they're a little bit more, I don't know, they don't seem as concerned with getting that information right at the front. I don't know, is that?
Yeah, I agree. That's very accurate. I know that non-veterans, it's I don't want to say it's easier, but I want to say that it's a little bit different in the way you approach the entire process. Definitely with veterans, like you said, want the information up front. They're very direct and to the point, like Jen mentioned. And truthfully, I enjoy working with veterans. I don't know. I'm a veteran, so for me, it's just it's the love, but at the same time, that instant connection that you have when you're up front, when you could bring the knowledge to the table, when you can educate a veteran, you're on top of the world, right? Because many veterans are getting out of the military with very little information. I don't think a lot of people realize this. Like, I know that there's, there are they're what they call TAPS back in the day. I don't even know what it's called now. They try to transition us from being military minded to civilian. That doesn't work, man. You can't take the years that we put in and compound it into a 3-day program to then kick you out to the real world, right? And in that program, they throw in a little bit about the VA loan, right? And I served for 9 years. I didn't know what a VA loan was when I got out, okay? I mean, it wasn't until I was actually selling real estate that I realized what a VA loan was and the benefits that were behind it, right? And even then, because you're military and that sounds like a military program, there's a certain level of distrust to it, and from the military member, there's almost like, well, I don't know, man. Anything I've ever tried to sign up for in the Marine Corps, like first thing we were taught in boot camp was don't volunteer, buddy. You know what I mean? So, don't volunteer. You're gonna be voluntold, right? So and so now, now you get out with this mentality of that, right? And so if we can come as professionals and step up to the plate and educate a veteran and say, hey, listen, this is what you qualify for. This is your right? And this is what's available to you. And by the way, it's going to save you a ton of money. You're not going to have PMI, like things I'll let you guys get into, but there's so much savings that goes behind it. And I personally take things to another level because I talk to my veterans about, filing claims for disabilities and so forth and so on, because in some states, especially like here in Florida, I don't know if it's the same everywhere else, but here in Florida, if you're 100% disabled veteran, you don't pay property taxes. That's a big deal to somebody, right? So like right now we have a veteran that we're getting under contract shortly. She waited to be 100% disabled, to have that official 100% before she went to go buy a house, because for her, she said, I can get now more house for my money because I don't have property taxes anymore. And that makes a huge difference. So it's just straight education, being able to educate. And that's kind of what I'm hoping we could spill out to everybody sitting and watching this right now, is to be able to take this, what we're giving them, and use it as like, fuel to light a fire under all the veterans that they know.
So jumping off of that, I would love to jump in here. And so let's talk about some of that information and those requirements. I'm just gonna jump to Leroy on this one. I'll throw this one at you. First is credit score requirements and like debt to income, because as realtors, we look at that, and I'm not gonna lie, my favorite thing is to be like, well, that's not, I know basic guidelines of what you're looking for, but that's some information that you're going to want to talk to your loan officer. So what are they looking at on a VA loan, and what does that look like that's different maybe than in a conventional loan or something else, or an FHA? What are those credit score requirements? How does that work? And then the DTI?
Well, and that's a good question. I'm gonna start. I'm just gonna kind of backtrack. Is that when you look at, like, you've got a full panel of veterans, and then you have Jen, who's an advocate, right? So I think what's important for the group or whoever's watching this is that because you're a civilian and you didn't serve, that doesn't mean you can't serve continually, because there's so many, I would say, civilians is what we call them, right, that serve at such a high level and understand, like Jen, who has the VA guidelines in and out. And so just because you didn't serve doesn't mean you can't serve, right? So I think that's crucial for all the agents that might watch this, and or lenders that watch this, is that your advocacy is really focused on serving the veteran at that point. So although we might have a connection vet to vet, right? No BS. We can do that. And it's an instant interaction, but that doesn't mean if you're a civilian, you didn't serve, you can't do this at a very high level to serve your veteran. So I wanted to just make that point. So when it comes back to, the credit score, the 26-7 VA lender handbook, right? The handbook that all lenders, investors go off of, is there's a guideline. There's actually no credit score. And so there's really not a guideline on that. Now, that being said, because the VA does not lend the money, right? We have investors that lend the money. They're going to have what's called overlays. And overlays are basically stating that, hey, we're only going to lend at 660, right? So there's automobile associations out there that think that they do VA loans, and they're going to have a requirement of, say, 640. So at that point, that's what their lender or investor overlay is. And so that's kind of how they underwrite it. But really, technically, there's not a score, but usually around that 580, 550 is going to be pretty much the cutoff. So my question for veterans out there would be, is that if you have a 550 or 580 credit score, what's going on? What's the circumstance? What happened in your life? Because your credit's reflecting some type of hardship in that circumstance. And so there's also what's called a manual underwrite, Jesse. And manual underwrites, and I've learned so much from Jason on this. He's like the master of manual underwrites, right? So manual underwrites, what those are basically, you have two systems, right? So you have Loan Prospector, and then you have desktop underwriting. So Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, and then if you don't get the automated, which is approved eligible, you're going to go into a manual underwrite status. So there are certain guidelines within the 26-7 where you have those guidelines in which you can have some flexibility. Debt to income ratio, right, can't be over probably 60% at that point. Front end ratio, 41. Some lenders cap that at 43% on the back end ratio. So that, but there are circumstances or life circumstance in which you can create a letter of explanation and understand what's going on in the profile. Here's the thing. When you're done with the 26-7, when it really articulates what an investor wants to do for the VA to guarantee the loan, they really want to help the veteran to have home ownership. So if you have a home ownership and there are circumstances like, why did this happen? How did it work? How can we insure it? And how do we put more veterans in the home? And that's literally the guideline. So getting, obviously with the loan officer, everybody's going to have different overlays and investors to be able to sell to, or if you're on the retail side, you have one investor that you're focusing on from a warehouse. But as a mortgage broker, we have several different entities which have flexibility. So it's a case-by-case scenario, going through, but credit score is really not a factor, but it's life circumstance and, ability to repay.
Let's go into a quick myth, right? Because I've actually heard this out loud before, and I put it on my question list here. And I wrote, is it true that veterans use the VA loan because they don't have the money? And so they got to take advantage of this 100% loan, right? And so I put that out there because I've actually been told that on the other line, like I've sent an offer, 100% financing, so forth and so on. And the agent on the other side says, well, is it because they don't have money? Do they have enough money to close? Can you guys talk a little bit about that and help me debunk this myth? Jason, go on with it, man.
I was going to say, can we throw that one at Jason? Because honestly, when I hear that from somebody, I'm not going to lie to you.
You know what's funny is I threw it to Jason because I could just see his face start turning red,
So great question. And I do get this all the time. And I think that's one of the advantages of how I answer that to listing agents, because I call the listing agents on every one of our offers because it's so competitive, and I'm sure Leroy and Jim do as well. It's if your loan officer's not doing it, find a new loan officer. But whenever I get a question, I'm like, yes, I use that as a talking point to build up the veteran. Like, yes, the veteran has sufficient funds to close. I would not have issued a pre-qual letter without that, but I'm sure other people in your past have done that. So I get the question. I said, that's one of the beautiful things and the advantages of a VA loan is they don't have to put any money down. Now, a lot of vets, I wouldn't say majority, but a lot of vets do have a down payment. I've got a veteran right now that's putting $100,000 down on a $400,000 house because he sold a house, he got $100,000, he wants to go to the house. So now he's 75% LTV, which is better than most conventional 10% down or 15% down loans. So whenever the veteran isn't putting any money down, that gives him or her more room if you have an appraisal gap, right? So let's say you've got a client of a conventional client that's putting 5% down, and that's all they've got is their 5% down, and now they still have to put down 5% and cover the appraisal gap. A VA loan is actually superior because chances are the veteran has more additional funds that they're not using because of this. They're getting a dislocation allowance because they're transferring PCS orders, or they're getting whatever it is. They're getting sign-on bonus because they're starting a new job because they're generally going to be a more technical job that they're starting, so they're going to have sign-on bonuses. So there's a big advantage there with 100% financing over a conventional 10, 15, 20% down.
And that's I'm glad that we brought that up because another thing that we hear is people haven't realized that the limitations on VA loans are a lot less right now, and they're becoming less and less limitations as we move forward, and people are starting to realize, holy crap, the VA loan's great, right? So can you guys touch a little bit about interest rate on a VA loan in comparison to some other loans, some other traditional loans? Also tap into VA appraisals, because that's a big one, right? That's another one. Like, you get the agent on the other side that says, man, I don't know, this VA appraisal is going to take forever. We're going to be sitting around waiting 30 days only to find out it didn't appraise because VA does low all the time. Like, can you guys touch on that a little bit? And I'll let you guys round robin that. Leroy, if you want to start, and then we'll go Jason and Jen.
And so 2-part question, VA appraisals. What was the other one? Marines. Like, what?
That's right. Interest rate limitations. Like, so for instance,
interest rates. Yes.
Yeah.
Interest rates. So, when you look at it, it's so funny because David, I teach a ton, right, in my local community in a couple different states I'm in. We talk about interest rates, right, because there's a difference in wholesale versus retail versus banking and or automobile associations or companies, right, that like to change their name and put veteran in it just to attract, leads per se, right? So, when you look at interest rates, traditionally you're anywhere from 0.5% to 0.75%. In my particular market, it's a full 1% difference in interest rates when you're looking at conventional versus VA. And so when you look at affordability, right? So I'm in Arizona. I live in Arizona. The average sale in Glendale, Arizona, Peoria, Arizona is about 404. And so 404,000. Jesus. And so when you look at that and you're going, wow, if there's an interest rate that's a higher percent. So if we're at, conventional at 5.5 or 5.25 is what some people are, and we're at more 4.5 on a VA loan. When you look at affordability, when you're looking at the VA loan, that 404,000 is now 450,000. That's a huge difference on the same payment, in which now, once you get up to that bracket, you have more affordability and or choices with lack